Ever wonder how the top musicians make split second decisions under pressure and what happens when their creativity well runs dry? Well, today on this episode, we're going to explore the science of decision fatigue and its impact on life. But specifically, we're going to be looking into the world of music and creativity.
In this episode, we'll uncover how musicians navigate the countless choices they face daily, from creative composition and collaborative performances to teaching the next generation. We'll explore how cognitive overload impacts their artistry, teamwork, and ability to mentor. Ultimately, we aim to equip you, our listener, with actionable strategies to optimize your own decision making, whether you're a musician, a creative, or simply someone seeking peak mental performance.
I'm Dr. Sean Watson. I'm a neuroscientist and an entrepreneur. And our research over the past number of years has looked into decision fatigue, specifically how it can affect our life and our ability to perform at work and at home. And in our episodes and in this podcast, we're looking at different things that you can do and ways to overcome these challenges.
And I'm Sean's co-host, Michelle, and my experience as a marketer, marathon runner, and mum have shown me how these insights translate into real-life strategies for overcoming cognitive overload and achieving peak performance.
And I'm super excited for our guest today because he's a master of music, which, to be honest with you, as a neuroscientist, I don't really understand. I appreciate it. I love the creativity, but I've never really got that music gene in me, I suppose. And our guest today is a Singaporean composer whose music has resonated across halls, games, and global brand. He's a Berklee College of Music alumnus who's now a professor there with a degree in jazz composition, and his company Leon Ortega has served industry giants. His compositions has graced campaigns for Ferrero, Samsung, and GlaxoSmithKline. He was invited as an adjudicator at the Cannes Lion Festival of Creativity. Before that, he ran East Coast Scoring, where he employed up to 100 musicians a year for renowned operas and shows. His talent is undeniable, his energy is infectious, his LinkedIn is one of the funniest things I read every day, and his achievements are truly inspiring. Please welcome Xiao'an.
Hello. It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
We are, really, really excited to get into it today. I think I'm going to go straight in with a question, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
I'd just love to understand the sheer volume of creative choices or creative decisions that you might face on a single project.
So is that sort of like an open-ended question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about decision making in your life and in your work.
So a lot of it starts at the meeting with the client. So I'm just going to talk about this from the context of working with a commercial client to get a piece of music that they need, but maybe that they don't realize that they want in the beginning, and so you have to navigate that. And that's part of it too. So in addition to sort of having to be able to do all the creative stuff, you have to be a student of human nature in some ways, because art, and before I sound a little bit too philosophical here, I would just want you to know that all of this stuff is strictly functional. Art is a reflection of human experience. You take in input and then you spit it out. And then now it's covered in your DNA. It's just you take in something from the world, right? And then you transform it, and then you put it out. So it's really not much different from anything else that we do as human beings. I think it's sort of creativity connects across a lot of different disciplines. But anyway, to answer your question about the sheer volume of creative decisions, besides working with a client and being creative with how you present the work, present sort of options to them, when you're actually doing the writing, every single note that you put down is a decision. Right. And sometimes you can sort of amalgamate these into like compound decisions, for example, because if you have a lot of experience, you might not think in single note by note, you might think in whole phrases, but then that's a decision. And in terms of what you might want to do with that phrase, we have 12 available pitch classes in most Western music. Right. And so I'm a student of Western music. That's all I write. So it's jazz, Western classical stuff. But every time you choose a note, you can choose between 12 different pitch classes. And then when you choose the next note, you can choose again from 12 pitch classes. And so so you take 12, multiply by 12, multiply by 12, and that's sort of like eventually you see the sheer magnitude of what you have to deal with and sort of like how variable everything is, and why it's kind of not too difficult to come up with something that's more or less original, because there's just so many selections out there. And how we deal with that as musicians is that we condense things down. So for the most part, even though there are 12 pitch classes, most of the time what we use is groups of 7. So that we've already sort of like taken it down. And so this is kind of like a heuristic method, for not having to do more work than is necessary. So we've sort of taken the decision making out of the picture by relying on these systems. And so some of the best people in the business um, are constantly creating systems around how they work. So when I work, for example, and not to use myself as an example right after I said, as people who are the best in the business, but how I like to work is I adopt a very systematic approach to how I write. So everything from the way my project is organized, the way the way I think about what notes to select, these are all informed by past experience and sort of general systems of thought that I formed over time, either through experience or through education. And what these systems allow me to do is cut out as much decision making as possible from the process, so that when I do need to make one, I'm good. Like I'm not exhausted. And this is something that I tell my students to do because I see their projects, right? When you're young and you haven't worked on this for a long time, your projects are a mess. They just look awful, right? So I tell them, bring your computer to class, and they refuse to do it. Bring it to class and open your project and let's put it up on the projector. And usually what it shows me is that someone is trying to build something from the ground up without thinking ahead. And so if you think ahead, sometimes you can save yourself some of that mental and decision fatigue, because you've already anticipated, from experience that at this point, if I am not prepared, I'm going to have to spend an hour figuring it out how to do this, or what I want to do. And then after I'm done with all this stuff that isn't actually creative, then it's time to write. I'm cooked, and so I don't want to do it then, right? So it's a combination of things. But anyway, so my very long answer to you, Michelle, in sort of like the amount of work and the amount of decision making that's involved in creating music is that there is a lot, but it is not unmanageable, right? We've obviously found ways to manage it, and some of these ways, eventually, as you get more experience with them, are not too difficult. And Sean, like you mentioned, you don't have a music gene. Actually, Harvard would disagree because it's there was a study about it was called the universality of human song, and it got a bunch of people to identify the purpose of music from uncontacted tribes, and they found that people were able to identify the purpose of it at a rate greater than chance. So that it shows that sort of there's something inherent to us. So I got news for you. It's not that you can't play music, it's that you just didn't try or you're not interested, which is okay.
That's a really cool study though. Interesting.
But it's not genetic. Yeah.
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 I don't know. I think my husband wouldn't believe it. Like I can't even clap in time. We're at a concert and the singers, like everyone's clapping along and I can't even catch it.
I mean, look, I've interacted with a fair number of people who psych themselves out, and there's probably, I'm not going to recommend ayahuasca, but it's like it's probably something where at this point you think this is kind of like a little bit, maybe it's part of your identity already. If you think of children will just instinctively move. There's not a child that would be ashamed, unless they're made to feel ashamed when they're listening to music and they're dancing, and they seem to do perfectly fine. So yeah, I think you can.
That'll be another podcast when we teach Michelle how to dance in class.
That will be your most listened to podcast.
Most viewed.
Yeah.
most ridiculed.
You there's so much to unpack in what you said. I think
Yeah.
it's that was a fantastic answer. My first question to you, just before I get to the
Mhm.
latter ones, is how you manage music creation now. Do you think it's different from, I mean, obviously Mozart and these people never had computers
Mhm.
and stuff. It's just,
Yeah.
is the requirement as a career, is it all compressed that you need to produce far more than people had to in previous generations? So the demands on you and your creative process require all this pre-planning? Like, is it a result of the demands on the industry to do more with less?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be an accurate assessment. The thing is, it would not have been possible 50 years ago to ask your average composer to do what we asked them to do today. But because technology has come so far, it is now possible to ask a composer that, and it's not that unreasonable to expect that they would be able to fulfill the request. So just to give you an example, and in terms of sort of managing that music creation process, and you were talking about Mozart, right? There's a tool that's used in the music production industry and just general audio industry. It's called Pro Tools, and Pro Tools was based on tape recorders, so physical things that would record onto tape. The interface of that and the functionality of that was turned into a digital audio workstation, which is what I use now, right? And the first of these was called Pro Tools, and it was supposed to mimic that. And so, no matter where we go with technology, very often, in the same way that there's like the little receiver on your phone that Gen Z kids will not know what the hell that is because they've never had to pick up that kind of a phone. A lot of the functionality of software today and a lot of the things that we do today are not particularly new. It's just that they're done in a new way. So, in terms of sketching out a piece of music, I might play with a piano sample library into my digital audio workstation to sketch out something, where previously what John Williams would have done is he would be playing at the piano, but in order to record that down, he would take the ideas that he came up with on the piano and then write that down on a piece of paper in sort of so this is like a reduction, like and he would take that reduction and send it to an orchestrator, and the orchestrator would flesh it out into a score for a whole orchestra. But now some people do that still, but nowadays you can just play it. You can just play it in, and then you can use that as a reference instead of having to write it down. So there's some benefits to writing it down, like just sort of visualizing it. It's like the same thing as it's like, do you listen to an audiobook? Do you read the physical paper? It's different ways of absorbing the information, but everyone sort of like has a different method and different preference, right? So it's immaterial because at the end the final product is still a recording. Yeah. So I would say that in terms of how I managing the music creation process, not a whole lot has changed, which is why it's important for us to look into the past to understand what we're doing today, because we really are doing the same stuff. It's just that the technology looks different.
You said you do this prep and you try to manage your program and your project, but then at one point, when you're trying to be creative, you're cooked. What do you mean by cooked? Just to double click that, just because I think in all these different, and we have some amazing folks like yourself on this podcast, and to me, kind of what you're describing is you hit a point of all these decisions, and then your creativity seemed to suffer. But maybe, yeah, just to double click on cooked.
Yeah, so I mean, another way to say it is like my brain's fried. Brain no worky. you know, my wife and I use the term toasty. So my brain is toast. So
Yeah.
basically, what it is um, it we reach she and I reach a point maybe that we just don't want to do anything, and the previously when we were unable to recognize this, um, or at least when I was unable to recognize this, like in my past, as a young man, before I turned into a geriatric person that you see today. But no, as when I was much younger, I would probably just get angry or cranky or just kind of act out based on sort of like sensations that I wasn't understanding, because my brain was just incapable of doing the work that I was trying to make it do. and then yet I forced it through. And I think this is what happens with a lot of people in a 9 to 5 job, is that you've reached sort of like the end point and you just keep going. So when I say cooked, yeah, I reach a point where I cannot take on the creative function that I'm supposed to. And so at that point, I have to stop, because moving forward just actually doesn't do anything. And usually that means I'm done for the day, because it doesn't come back until after I sleep. And I think we had a conversation about that.
No, it's remarkable because we always talk about decision fatigue as being physiological, not psychological. And I think just even the podcast and everybody that we're talking to, yourself, across vocations, from a hedge fund manager to a trader to a musician like yourself, it's a consistent phenomenon. In your case, though, it sounds like it's that decision avoidance. So you're basically fried, done. I don't want to make any more decisions. I don't want to do anything else. I'm going to wait until tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean the I'm gonna wait till tomorrow is more the is we've gone into sort of the how I manage it then, because if I wasn't managing it by waiting till tomorrow, then I would probably fry myself even more, and then the next
Hmm.
day I would probably still be fried because I'd be pissed at myself. So that's a different layer of like emotion. That's not
Right.
just decision fatigue. So when the decision fatigue happens, it happens, and I can't do anything about it. So I just have to wait. That's how I manage it. You
Hmm.
know,
But that took
yeah.
you years to understand.
It took me years and some conversations with you to understand that. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
I'd, I'd love to go back
yeah,
a little bit early to when you're composing,
yeah.
and how much of it now is intuitive versus deliberate decision making when choosing those notes.
So I am not an intuitive composer. I never sort of really had that gift, but I now move at a speed that seems like intuition to some people. Sort of under the hood is me going shit fuck. You know? It's like, but yeah. So I mean, I would say that when I work at a speed or a pace, or in a way that some might consider intuitive, I am aware of a lot of little things that are happening beneath the surface. Um, even if, so I don't know, maybe I am instinctive, but I'm aware of my instinct. So I know when it's coming from sort of a split second decision that I'm making because I've seen this before.
So it's almost like deliberate, but with experience,
Well,
like years of experience.
it's with experience, and maybe the actual thing isn't deliberate, but I'm my mind is moving fast enough that I can stop myself from doing the instinctive things sometimes if it's the bad decision, and sometimes I can't. But so it's a combination, because music, I think instinct is just mathematics from a distance. And I'll explain what I mean by that. It's like when you look at code, or when you look at a painting, right? And you look close enough, you're going to see the particles of pigment in the carrier media. And then you zoom out, you see the strokes. And then you keep zooming out, and then you see a face, right? And so when I'm when I'm working, a lot of the stuff is like actual mathematical decisions that I'm aware of. And sort of, even if I do them by instinct, I know that there is a logic beneath them that I'm able to do by instinct because I've done it so many times. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if that sort of like adds a little color to that that question. Yeah.
It does for me, and I have a follow-up because I always wondered. So,
Yeah.
like music, you're right, is just math, right? It at its
It
core,
is
it's just math.
absolutely it is absolutely math. Yeah.
And why I why I think
Yeah.
musicians are still magic, and you went to Hogwarts, is how do you turn that math into emotion? And is that instinct or deliberate, right? Because it's just math, but how does it evoke emotion? And the universality of music, like you
Sure.
said, how
Yeah.
a tribe that we've never heard, we can understand the emotion
Mm.
that they're trying to generate. So is that
Right.
deliberate or intuitive? And I mean,
So
one
yeah.
last comment is you go back to musicians, they have to study human nature, did you say? Or what was
We have to
I
be
forget what you said.
students of human nature.
Students of human nature. I love
Yeah.
it because it
Yeah.
makes sense. But please,
Yeah.
I want to know, is it on
Sure.
purpose or intuition?
So I would say that there are definitely some aspects to music that are simply instinctive and possibly not worth questioning all that much. Um, but there are also the learned responses. So, for example, I mean, we might be genetically predisposed to identify certain kinds of basic emotion or functionalities, such as a lullaby or dance music. But I think in terms of everything else, there is a big layer to this that's cultural and that's learned. And so I think it's a combination of the two, and I think it's important to know sort of like when w- kind of like which one you're dealing with, because there are some things that are immutable and some things that are not. And again, I say this not as like a music researcher or anything. It's just I've read a few papers, and sort of like the rest of it is through experience and kind of thinking about it. I'm a scientist in the Greek sense, in which I come up with an idea and think, that sounds right. you know. So yeah, so I mean, I think it's a combination of the two. There's a little bit of instinct, but there is a lot of stuff on top of that there's a lot of cultural underpinnings. So in terms of
And
like, yeah, sorry, yeah,
oh, and so would a client would come to you, say it's like a video game, and would they
yeah,
come to you and be like, I want the player to feel calm here. Now I want them to get excited. Now I want them
sure,
to be scared. Like,
yeah.
would a client come to you just with like an emotional timeline of how you kind of they want you to make the player feel? Is it,
I
or am
I
I
should be so
simplifying things?
I should be so lucky.
Oh,
Very,
really?
very,
Okay.
yeah. Very often, what they do is it's not quite so granular and so foundational. They tend to say, "I want it to kind of sound like this," and then they give you the thing, and then you have to ask. Different clients, will have different levels of briefs, but then you have to ask clarifying questions like, okay, what's the key narrative moment here, right? What is this person feeling? Are we in the music? Are we reflecting what's happening on screen versus what's happening in the person's head? Like, for example, if you think about humor, okay, and humor is often well expressed when the person in the scene does not understand what everyone else is seeing. So, or sort of acts in a way that is counterintuitive to the audience. So for example, if you see like a large portly gentleman walking down the street, it would be sort of very basic Mickey Mousey early Disney to sort of put a bassoon less marking his steps, or a tuba, right? But that would be descriptive of the physicality of the situation, which sometimes that's called for. But let's say he's having a great day. He's having a fantastic day. And then so you have music that reflects his state of mind, something glorious, right? And then there's a little bit of humor to that, because there's something so sincere and something so naked about the way he's feeling, because we're seeing into their head, right? So there's a lot of different stuff that you can do with the music. Are you describing what's happening physically? Are you describing what's happening in the head? Are you describing something that maybe both the characters don't know, but the audience is supposed to know at that point? For example, someone's about to be betrayed, and then so the music can be unsettling, even though it's like a happy occasion, and then people know, something's up, because it's incongruous. So so yeah, a client. I would say that I haven't done very much film and TV, but I would say that you probably get into more conversations like the one that I was just having of myself here, uh, in those kinds of scenarios. But very often when I write, it's for like a casual game. It's just 1 minute of music, just supposed to kind of create a certain mood. That's it. Or if it's an ad, um, usually you just write whatever they ask you to write, because the creative director has spoken.
Right. Well, that
Yeah.
would be Michelle. So, Michelle, I mean, the question to
Yeah.
you as well. When you would give a brief, would you look at music as an emotion? Like, is that part of your decision process when you give a brief for a composer?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. So my background's strategy and planning. So if usually I would like say, okay, this is what they want to feel at this point. But also, I'm not. not necessarily the creative writing the script or the producer. I'm the bit before that says, we need an idea for an ad or a piece of content that is going to make people feel like this, so that they act on this in this way. They take this decision or they take this action. But it's ultimately up to the creative to kind of ideate what that execution is, and then eventually kind of get it to the composer to create the music.
She designs the little cage for the creative director to sit inside.
Yes, that's basically it. And I stand on the outside and whip them when they come back with ideas that are not in that cage and not answering what the client wants.
You have to think about the business objectives.
Yeah, I'm the person in between the creatives and the client. It's really hard because I'm like, no, oh look, see, rain and storms.
Why is it raining?
I don't know. Like, I didn't even know it did that.
Funny.
But yeah, I'm that bit in between the creatives and the client. So I'm trying to keep the creatives in track and trying to convince the client that, maybe they need to expand what they think they want. And here's the data to support that. So I actually want to go back as well to something you said at the beginning, Xiao'an, which was systems, that you've created systems for like when you are composing. And I think unbeknown to you, that's creating protocols to limit that feeling of your brain not working, or that decision fatigue, or hitting that wall in the creative process. Can you tell us a little bit about those systems, like what they look like, and maybe how you teach your students as well?
Well, it's a very deliberate process, and so the key thing here is that you have to identify everything in your chain of work that does not require creative energy. It's like when something is sort of like it's pretty cut and dry, like, oh, I have to set this up, like I have to change this to a different color so that I know that these instruments are different from these instruments visually when I'm working. That stuff shouldn't be something that you do every single time that you work. It should be set up for you before you start. And so unless you are very famous, you do this yourself. And so you set up your, it's called a template. And so I typically work with an orchestral instrumentation. So when I pull up a project, I want all my instruments there. I don't want to spend 5 seconds waiting for it to get pulled from my hard drive. So when I start a project, I want to make sure that the most likely pieces of software that I will use are loaded and where I want them to be. So I don't want to have to set it up every single time. So that's one example of a system that I use. Another system that sort of like, for example, things like it's something called signal chain. And so there are different kinds of plugins that you use to modify a sound during your mixing process. And so certain plugins should always come before other certain plugins, except in specific situations. So I don't have to think about that anymore because I've already learned a system of how to think about these plugins that I'm working with, that I know that I shouldn't be putting them before this or after this, and so that will create problems for me to fix later on. So that's another kind of system. Other systems are sort of like more loose and implied and in my mind. So for example, if I want to write a piece of jazz music, then my brain sort of shifts to, and I think about chords, for example, chords being sort of groupings of notes that I played that sort of like describe the harmony of a song. If I'm writing a piece of jazz music versus if I write a piece of music that's supposed to sound like it originated in the Middle East, then I would have very different conceptions of harmonic choices. And so those choices are informed by the different systems that are used for composing those types of music. And so having familiarized myself, especially with jazz, because that's what I went to school for, being very familiar with that, I don't have to think too hard about what chord do I use, when should I use it, when is it not appropriate, or if I use this chord, am I still in the 40s or am I in the 60s? In terms of year, right? Because the types of chords that we use changed over time a little bit. And so yeah, things like that. These are all systems, right? So some of them are as mundane as me sort of like setting up my dashboard, right? That's a system. And then there are some that are a little bit more sort of like stuff that you have to go to school for, and what what harmonic system am I using, and if I want to transition from, and especially, if you want to get two different genres to work together, you have to sort of understand where they intersect and where they don't. So if you wanted to sort of have a collaboration between a pop artist and say a traditional Indian instrumentalist, right? You have to, they would be able to work it out because they're musicians. But if you have to sort of control that, or if you have to sort of simulate that virtually, then you're going to have to understand where Western music and traditional Indian music intersect and where they don't. And then so if there will be less experimentation involved, and you can just work on actually creating the ideas. Because if you spend like 50% of the time figuring out why something doesn't work, because you didn't go in with the sufficient amount of knowledge and the knowledge of the systems that you need to know about, then you're going to waste a lot of time. And then after that, after you figured out the problems, then you're cooked. You don't want to work anymore. Yeah.
It sounds like you said you spend a lot of time setting up that creative period of work. So to make sure that you're like as well positioned as you possibly can be for creativity, by eliminating all of those mundane decisions and everything, those protocols that you just decide. That's fascinating to me. I mean, that's really interesting how you've kind of naturally developed this because you recognize the creativity part.
Do you know anything about how the sort of like the modern kitchen brigade system works, like in restaurants? So there's a thing, there's mise en place, right? Everything in its place. And so they have all their tools and all their prep ingredients, everything laid out in the right way. So when they cook, they can just go, they know where everything is. They're not frying a piece of fish and be like, oh, I need garlic, and then go chop a piece of garlic and the fish is overcooked. That doesn't make any sense. So kitchens work like that too. And if you go on, if you think about sort of like mechanics, right, or people working in construction, everyone sort of has their tools in the place that they expect them to be. You got your speed square hanging from your tool belt. You got little fancy magnetic things holding your hammer. And or if you're a mechanic, and you need a particular size of wrench, you're not going to look all over the shop for it. You're gonna know where it is. And so in everything that we do as human beings, there is always some aspect of craft. So this is the part, the part of being a good craftsman is sort of knowing where everything that you need to work with is. And so this is universal. It is, I guess it is fascinating to hear about it from a musician's perspective, because musicians are often positioned as sort of flighty, ethereal beings that rely on inspiration, where very often that's an act or they're singers. Okay. but usually sort of if you're a producer or whatever, you're pretty meticulous. You'll see that most producers, and I mean not me, okay, you're seeing the neatest part of my room, but a lot of producers and engineers have impeccable workspaces. They're very, very neat about what they do.
I love that. I just expected it to be a very kind of creative, messy process,
It is messy.
The movies.
It is messy. The mess is me. I'm a mess. Everything else is in its place. Yeah.
Yeah. But I love that. I love being able to like have your tools ready and there, so you're not having to think halfway through, oh god, I need this, and I've got to come out. You're coming out of that creative flow, right? Like you're allowing yourself, like you've got your systems, you've got your tools in place, right. So when you're in that creative flow, nothing's going to disrupt it.
Yeah. And I will say that I don't want to misrepresent anything. Like, look, I'm very organized, especially digitally. I'm very, very organized digitally. And my room, though messy, is a place where I know where stuff is, but no one else will be able to find it. So so the system doesn't necessarily appear obvious to someone else, but there is one.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And then, so how are you teaching this to your students?
Well, when you have like maybe 12, 13 weeks to teach them, you can't hammer all this stuff in, but I try to just kind of like, because a lot of this is built up from a basic foundation. And unless you're very rich and you have an extremely powerful computer, you need to sort of be economic about that process. And so I tell them, instead of doing this, group your instruments, and process 5 of them with a single compressor, for example, and that way they learn about economy, I guess. But so in terms of teaching them how to do it, so I'll just tell you first of all the class that I teach. It's basically their final class before they graduate, and this is what I taught this semester. I only started this spring, right? So I don't have a method yet, but they sorry, my brain no worky. Um, they I have to teach every student individually because every single one of them has different goals, different aspirations, and also they have a different set level of ability. So I don't give them sort of like a standard spiel or anything. It depends on the project that they're working on and depends on what they want to do in the future. So for those that want to just do music in the future, I impress upon them the importance of speed. Um, and I tell them you have to be fast, and this is how fast you have to be. And right now, where are you? Where are you at? And can I see how you work? And if I see how they work, and then I can identify these problems, I'll tell them, hey, conceptually speaking, uh, you would be a lot faster if you thought about this way. So next class, or maybe 2 classes from now, bring me a project and show me that you're doing it with a different philosophy, right? And let's see if that improves it. And so generally they improve because the thing is, when you're 21 or 22, your work process is almost always going to be just a total mess because you're learning so many different things, and so it's very normal to be disorganized. So I just try to polish them up a little bit before they leave.
We had a podcast before with an AI specialist, which was fascinating, and his take on AI was about enabling human cognition. And so in all these processes, do you see AI speeding up all of those mundane things? Because I can never see it replacing that creativity. So how about like when you teach your students, how is AI playing into all this?
AI generally doesn't play into it because a lot of the solutions out there that are supposed to solve problems in music aren't actually solving problems. And so, for example, I haven't seen an AI assistant that will help me to clean up things in my in my session or things like that. And there probably are out there, but they're not the ones that are marketed. The ones that are marketed are the ones that will make music, so you don't have to. Like what's the point? We want to make music. I think there was even one AI CEO that said that, oh, we liberate musicians from the drudgery of making music. I'm like, is this going to go up in video, by the way?
Yes.
Oh, okay, so I won't give the finger, but that's what I was about to do. But yeah, so in terms of AI, I haven't yet seen a use of it and I actually thought I was working with an AI tool once, but it turned out it was just very cleverly designed, algorithmic. But yeah, I haven't really seen anything that I would recommend to my students, and they haven't, as far as the musicians go, they haven't used it, as far as I can see. Sorry, I don't. That's my answer to your
No, it's
question.
fascinating.
Yeah.
No, it does. It's fascinating to hear because it is something so human. I expect it to be one of the
People are
last things, if ever.
Well, people are barking up the wrong tree. There are problems that can be solved with AI, but as long as there's the profit motive, they're not going to solve those problems because there's no money in it. but they are actual problems that should be solved. But
Mhm.
capitalism. Yeah.
But you just hit like a really beautiful insight there, and it's like we're musicians. We want to make music. We want to create.
Yeah.
And I think, and that doesn't just apply to music.
Yeah.
Like that applies to almost everything. And I think
Learning how
maybe
to
we're
do
forgetting
anything.
that.
Learning how to do anything at all is a process that transforms you. And so if you eliminate the hard work, then you uh you lose out on the chance to transform yourself. I watch the art and the art watches me. There is something to that. And I think that if we are very much barking up the wrong tree where AI is concerned. I think it's got great potential, and I'm not actually like an AI naysayer. I'm the way AI is doing, like AI is wrong now. Like not AI is wrong forever. It's just people have their priorities messed up. I actually drew a I drew a pretty rude comic the other day because I remember when Suno came out with their the CEO of Suno, I think I hope I'm quoting the right person, but he was the one that said that he was eliminating the process of making music, that musicians don't really want to make music. They just want to get to the end result. Right. And so I drew a comic with a robot with a giant dick, uh, and a guy with a button, and it says, now I can be really good at sex. What? No, you're not. You're pressing a button like that. I feel like if that doesn't illustrate exactly what's wrong with this, I don't know what will.
But you know
I
what?
think
It's like, it's the clients though as well. Like people just want the end result. They just like, they're like, oh, I just want a piece of music for my game.
Okay.
If AI can do it and cut the corn, it's it's that kind of like tug of war between the people who want to make music, who it's their craft, they get satisfaction and enjoyment out of doing,
Sure.
out of creating and making and using the skills that they've spent so their entire lives to hone,
It's
versus the clients who are like, I just want the end result.
that saying, it was from World War II. First they came for the, and then they came for the, and then there was no one left to fight for me. You know that. And so what I find extremely amusing is that the kind of clients that you mentioned are inherently in creative fields themselves. And because they didn't hold on to any integrity, they will be destroyed. I'll still be around, but their opportunities to line their fat pockets with 50% of the fee that like the 50% they're withholding from me is
capitalism.
that's going to go away, because as they compromise and give up on whatever values they pretended to have in the first place, those are the ones that will lose, because they didn't hang on to the last precious thing that's going to be what everyone wants later, because it's so rare.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But what ultimately we're all going to want something real and something human
I think
in the
so.
end,
And I don't think anyone should have to pay for it. I think it's okay. I think, but again, capitalism. I mean, that's we don't know any other way to live.
Yet.
So yet. Yeah. I mean, some of us know,
Star
and just
Trek. Star
yeah.
Trek.
Star Trek again. Are we just going to rebrand this podcast? Because it's like it keeps coming up.
We just started watching Deep Space Nine again, and they went in hard. Like in the first 3 episodes, there was like transgender issues, there was lynching, and there was like race stuff and terrorism, and like it's within 3 episodes. Okay, so Star Trek
They never
is
held back. Yeah.
yeah. I am a huge fan. Yeah.
Well, I think you did touch on something, and Michelle, you just said it's like being human, right? Like people, like that quote you gave with whoever CEO it was about, it just completely misses the point of being human, right? And I think you're in a field that is just such a true representation of of something that we all relate to, right? To go back to your original point of tribes that we haven't had contact with, we understand their music. So I think it's I hope your voice continues to be loud on platforms like LinkedIn, just to remind people of what it really means.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just want to say something additionally here, which is that while it may be tempting to sort of cast music in sort of like this very important light, I think that as a discipline, it is no more human than any of these other disciplines, which are just as ancient, like building a house. We all need a roof to live under, growing our food. There is an artistry to all of this, and deep understanding of how the world works and how human beings work, our fundamental needs and desires, and need for safety, need for nutrition, whatever, right? And so I certainly don't think that art has a monopoly on this. And I think that perhaps we may have needed to have this conversation a little earlier when we were automating away all the stuff that we thought was just menial labor, and really sort of what we gave up in the process, I think maybe might have led us to where we are today. I'm not anti-automation. It's just that when you have savings, you got to pass them on to the consumer, man. But they don't.
Fair point. And
Yeah.
also, I think you're right. Just everything is moving so fast, though, right? If technology and processing power is
Yeah.
doubling every few years,
Yeah.
it's gotten beyond
Yeah.
anybody's control, I would say. Hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's metastasizing.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know, we previously, you know, it's just a little tumor here and there, but now it's systemic.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of, you know, I have got that question is how do musicians like find that balance between like artistic pursuits and the practicalities of making a living? And I think, like you
Hmm.
said, it's not just music. Like this is going to be across the board.
Well, I remember looking at one of these questions in the document, and regarding sort of like how do I maintain sort of artistic vision and so on. And you know, I mean, having been in advertising yourself before, I mean, I'm sure you'll understand when I say that my vision is whatever vision the client has. You know, and so if they want something in particular, my job is to sort of bring my years of experience in craft to bear so that they have I can turn their vision into something that they recognize, right? And something that pleases them. So as a commercial composer, my artistic vision doesn't really sort of come into play. I do have some level of sort of aesthetic discretion, yes, but most of the time what I'm trying to do is fulfill their needs and keep them happy. So I'm serving their audience, but also serving them. And I have to convince them sometimes that this, even though it wasn't what you originally asked for, is probably better for the context that they and usually what happens with those. And one of the best paying one of the best paying spots that I did, which I won't say which one that was, but like I sent in two versions, the version they asked for and the version that I thought that they probably should have, and because I knew that if I just sent that other one, they would have said no. But this way they could A B and see that their version sucked. They agreed, and it aired. So and I've done this a few times, and so yeah, I mean there's a little bit of that, but it's even then my artistic vision is not about selling shoes or whatever. That's not really sort of like why I started doing this. So it's at that point it's just a job, you know. And I think we should sort of like maybe not we don't have to take the creativity so seriously, because it is not rare. It's we all have it, you know. It's we musicians and artists don't have a monopoly on it.
I think one of my kind of not I don't know if it's quite a fear level yet, but a concern that, you know, my job won't exist in 5 years' time, you know, and you know, I'm no longer working in agencies, but even as kind of a marketer, so much, and I'm building a new marketing team now, and I'm like, right, okay, AI agents, I'm completely redefining every single marketing role in that team and I'm looking at, okay, how can we create AI agents to do 80% of the work of the team? So I'm hiring a significantly smaller team, and the roles of those team members are like roles that have never existed before, because I'm going to be expecting them to manage AI agents in the marketing team. And I think the fear is real, like for everyone. This is going to impact people's jobs, both in the music space and in advertising, in creative, in marketing.
I mean, I'll say that people don't need to worry about their jobs if their jobs weren't the only thing keeping them from death. And so I think the reason we are worried about it is because we know that people are very willing to implicitly kill others by designing systems and making decisions that maybe they won't make if they took your product, but making decisions that will ultimately have a really, really negative impact on others. And so eventually we hire fewer people, which means that fewer people have money to pay for things, which means that we'll have to hire fewer people. And then this Ouroboros will keep eating its tail until we're down to a singularity. So you're right to be worried about it, because I think that if we carry on the way we're carrying on, there is an end to this. And I think if we need to sort of like reshape society around how AI is trained and how we see work and the value of human life in the future. As a musician, I'm not particularly afraid, because it's not as though I can sort of do anything about the tide. But I also know that a lot of the stuff that I write has very little I don't write stuff that is easily standardized. And not because I have some kind of like an integrity thing about it. It's just I hate doing that other stuff. So I'm kind of like protected by my own disgust. And I know that some of my colleagues, they write stuff that's a little bit more, not say cookie cutter, but it's what the industry wants. And because of that, there is a massive corpus of well-organized, broken down, minute-long or 30-second long pieces of music out in libraries with 5 million tracks that would be very, very nice fodder, well annotated fodder for AI training. And so I don't do that. And so if we move to a future where all the really high production quality stuff that sounds all the same is automated, then maybe my weird shit will have a niche market. I don't know. But yeah, I think it's kind of pointless to be worried about it. It's just gonna go where it's gonna go, and either we all die or we emerge
Star
into
Trek.
a new yeah or we get into Star Trek.
Yeah, but I think there's something in there though about like standing out, because there's always going to be a want to work with people who are doing things differently, who are
it's true. It's easy to say that we do things differently. I don't even think of myself as doing things particularly differently, even though I know for a fact that the instrument libraries that I use and the way I write is very, very different from a lot of my colleagues. But it's all music, right? And in the end, I don't see myself as doing anything like particularly groundbreaking or unique, but we shouldn't have to be groundbreaking just to make a goddamn living. You should just be good, right? Do the job. Everyone goes home, has a beer, or non-alcoholic beverage of your choice. I don't like the rhetoric that you have to stand out or you'll be left behind. Like, how many people can stand out? Like that completely, like there's always going to be an average. And newsflash, is probably you. You're probably average. Like most human beings, we're average, and so yeah, I don't like the rhetoric that that we have to stand out or be different just to survive. That seems ludicrous to me, especially when we live with so many resources that are so poorly distributed. Yeah.
That's why I
No,
love your voice on LinkedIn too.
oh man, I used
It's
to
just
take
such a
LinkedIn
funny
seriously.
platform.
I used to take LinkedIn seriously, and now I just don't care. I just write what the hell I want.
No, it's great because it's
I
a
love that.
platform that doesn't usually have commentary like yours. So it's yeah, everybody should definitely check it out.
Because most people have jobs they want to keep. Yeah. My
You know
boss
what?
says
I'm gonna take that, and Sean, don't fire me when I go off the rails on LinkedIn.
yeah, just go crazy. Just go hold him to his word.
They do it. Xiao'an, it's very late for you now. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Sure.
This has been a great conversation. I've loved it.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been we haven't had a guest like you on our show, and I think it's such an amazing perspective and unique. I know we just talked about being unique or whatnot, but just the human creativity component in decision making, decision fatigue, but also just in life is so valuable. So really appreciate you being on.
My pleasure. And you should have more artists on, like, or people in artistic fields, because like I said, it's math. I'm not exaggerating. I get along well with engineers and software people and physicists. One of my favorite people in Singapore is a physicist, and it's because mathematics connects everything. And sort of, I think this is actually very relevant to your podcast topic about decisions and decision fatigue, because we have to navigate so much mathematics on a day-to-day basis.
For everyone still listening, we're going to link to Xiao'an's profiles below. Please follow him on LinkedIn. And if you want to connect, everything will be in the show notes. Thank you, as always, for watching, listening, wherever you are. And don't forget to make every decision count. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.